Citizens, brothers and sisters, I speak to you, my friends.
Never had one heard such words from the mouth of the feared Georgian, who proclaims,
"The enemy must not find a single machine, a single wagon, a piece of bread, or a can of petrol. Shepherds must remove all their flocks."
This sort of frenzy of burning, as from the tragic past, seizes the people. As against the invasion of Teutonic horsemen and against Napoleon, they set fire to their own homes. The earth is scorched. The Germans advance into a desert of bonfire and ashes, towards a horizon of flames which seems to go on forever. Advancing towards Minsk, 3,500 German tanks in long grey columns are set loose in the plain. Behind the panzers march the infantry, drunk with singing and sun. In these immense open spaces, the war is infrequent, but there are battles for roads and villages with the crash of artillery and the grinding of tank tracks. Great encircling movements are developed by the Germans, which succeed in wiping out entire Russian armies. Few succeed in getting out of the trap, but some are lucky. These Russian tanks and trucks manage to escape by running the gauntlet of the German infantry and anti-tank units. Others, not so fortunate, swell the ranks of the prisoners, who will soon be suffering the fate of Nazi policy. An order of Hitler's stipulates that communists and political commissars be executed in the field. This order is often ignored by the army at the front, but the SS in the rear areas take it upon themselves to apply it. In this manner, hundreds of thousands of Russian prisoners die, executed or starved to death. Among them, Stalin's son-in-law. The German armored troops, after a 120-mile breakthrough, enter devastated Minsk, the first big town on the road to Moscow. At the beginning of July, the cavalry crosses the Berezina. The advance proceeds, marked by brief and violent fighting. The taking of Vitebsk is announced by German military fanfares. The panzers are now driving towards Smolensk, where Russian fortunes are about to change. Outside Smolensk, the Soviets produced some secret weapons. The terrifying Stalin organ that the Russian soldiers call Katusha after their favorite song. 36 rockets launched from a truck. The T-34 tanks are also seen for the first time. More heavily armoured and faster than German panzers, the T-34 is probably the best tank of the Second World War. But numerically, the Germans still hold the advantage. The fight for Smolensk is going to last 3 weeks. The town has to be taken by hand-to-hand fighting. In spite of the efforts of the German propagandists, the Russian soldiers resist to the end. Communiques are always triumphant, but German Supreme Headquarters knows that the Wehrmacht has already lost 100,000 dead and 300,000 wounded or missing. That's more than 10% of the total force sent out on June the 22nd. The equipment is worn out, but less so than the troops. Operation Barbarossa begins to slow down. Hitler feels that something somewhere is getting out of hand. In his personal Junkers, he flies to Minsk to look over the ruins. It is at this moment that Hitler feels he has a better understanding of military necessities than his general staff, and he decides to take matters into his own hands. The conduct of the Russian campaign will never be the same again. The troops acclaim him, but the generals are apprehensive of this meeting. A troubled conference is held in front of the map. The generals feel that the only thing to do is to swoop down on Moscow, which is only 210 miles away. For Hitler, on the contrary, Moscow is only a symbol. The objective must be changed. What counts is the Ukraine, with its reserves of wheat. Ukraine, which will feed the Reich. In the middle of August 1941, he alters course, turns the armed columns away from Moscow and moves them southward, despite the protests of the General Staff. But it's above all the partisan movement that expresses the will to resist the German invasion. Many soldiers who escaped capture in the pockets of Minsk and Smolensk take up with the underground movement in the impenetrable forests of White Russia. For the Germans, the danger is deadly. It weighs on their lines of communication, and still more on their morale. In the forests, death can come at them from all sides. To liquidate the underground, special detachments under the SS are set up and immediately distinguish themselves by their ruthless brutality. The Russian campaign takes on overtones of hatred. There are innumerable volunteers. Sometimes they're very young people, often mature men. The war has become the business of all the Russian people. Men and women flood in to serve in any way they can. Vintage equipment is used to train the raw recruits, and government posters promise better material to come. But the most extraordinary effort is in industry. 1,500 factories have been hastily moved from threatened areas. Thousands of trains have carried them hundreds of miles towards the Urals and Siberia. And some weeks later, the men and women work again for the Red Army. The Germans are going to learn that the Soviet Union is also a great industrial power. On the same day as the German invasion of Russia, Churchill from London offers Stalin the help of Great Britain. Some weeks later, Sir Stafford Cripps, British ambassador to Moscow, signs an aid treaty. The same agreement will be signed soon with Averell Harriman, special envoy from Roosevelt. Almost immediately, thousands of tons of war equipment leave the British ports. To get to Murmansk, the convoys must run the blockade of the German U-boats in the icy seas. But as time passes and the Ukraine is conquered, Moscow, once again, is the #1 objective of the Wehrmacht. General Guderian moves off on September the 30th in the direction of Moscow. It's the first act of Operation Typhoon. The objective? To take the Soviet capital in a pincer movement by more than 50 armored divisions. There is bitter fighting in the forests of Vyazma and Bryansk.